Yeah, if anyone comes in, then there's a So, hi everyone. I'm Libra. I'll be starting us off. So we're here to talk to you about how to make a furry visual novel. We've got some tips. So let me just briefly introduce the panel here. So we are from Team Woki. We're the one who makes the visual novel Where the Demon Lurks, and some other visual novels as well. Part of the teams are involved in that, right? So you guys want to say or just introduce? Right? So I'll just pass the mic. Everyone's just gonna tell their names.
I'm Wattson. I'm the main programmer on Where the Demon Lurks.
Hi, I'm Nawah. I do the editing and proofreading. I'm one of the editors, by the way. Yeah.
Okay. I'm Mako. I am the sprite artist of the other WTDL.
Yeah, there's another.
And I'm Eli. I'm the background artist for Where the Demon Lurks.
So my role is I'm director and as well as writer for Where the Demon Lurks. Alright. So we're gonna go through some of these topics today. So my part will be the first one, which is project management, and then so on and so forth, according to the panel here. Alright. So very quickly under project management, there are three key things that are kind of important. So my part is not very long. I'm just merely to pick points.
Now, can you move yourself a bit to the right so that you're not blocking the... There you go, thank you.
Okay. I'm here to just talk about like some tips. If you're going to start a visual novel, if you're going to be the lead of the team, or you're going to be managing the project, what are some key things you got to think of? Right? So let's go with the next one. So the thing is about your goals. So this is the same for any kind of project you want to start. You got to know like at the end, what's it going to look like. So in terms of pretty visual novels, usually the end goal will be even being able to finish your whole story is already a success. Many don't all go there, but some do, and those take a lot of work, right? So more specific things that you want to know in terms of goals is that these 3 points, they're not exactly like A, B, C, exactly like that. They're kind of on a slider. So like each of us, we do want some financial gains. We want this project to make some money sometimes. We all want some recognition for our hard work, right? We want people to know like, oh, that's the writer, that's the artist, that's the programmer, like that. And maybe you made up this project, it's just because this was a story you wanted to tell. You're just doing this out of your love of creation. So for anyone here, maybe as you take part to do a visual novel, your ambitions lie somewhere on a scale on these 3 points. So you gotta know your priorities. So that will tell you how much effort you're gonna put in, how much money you're gonna put in, how much time you're gonna put into this project. So no one can really tell you which one is the main point. That one is up to you to decide. Alright? So you gotta have a clear picture in terms of how big it's gonna be. So one of the issues is that a lot of those who start up making visual novels is you're very ambitious, especially if you're the writer. You have a lot of dreams, you have a lot of world building. Every character has their unique plot, their backstory. You want to tell all of that, but you need to know that realistically, you probably cannot do everything. So it's good to have a clear focus onto how big it's going to be. So you gotta know when is it going to start and where is it going to end at the very minimalist. Okay, so that depends on the director. Sometimes if the director is also the writer, so they can have a clear vision. How will we know that the visual novel will end is an important point, because if you don't know, then your story is going to go into another subplot, and you'll never reach it. So that's a good thing to have. Some people, they are more meticulous. They require step-by-step breakdown of the points. So it depends on you, if you are the writer, which one are you? Are you the kind that can, on the fly, think of an idea, or are you the kind that needs to structure out bit by bit every point? But very basic, you gotta know the start and at the end. How you fill up the middle is up to you, alright? And second, the mechanics of your game. So this means, we're talking about furry visual novels, but I think you've seen there are quite a few variations. They're not just reading visual novels. There are those that have implement mini games. There are those that implement rhythm functions like that. It depends on you and what you want to put in. You have to consider that as well. Because if you want to put in these extra mechanics, that means you're going to need more manpower, human power, you're going to need more finances as well, and more time definitely. So you have to decide on early on, are you going to put these things in? you gotta ask yourself and the team, is it necessary for you to put these things in? Like, why are you putting these mechanics in? Is it just for the sake of fun? Does it expand your storytelling? Or is it you're just doing it because everyone else is doing it? So you have to discuss about that with yourself, right? And lastly, who is your audience? So we know in terms of Furry visual novels, we're going after people who are interested in anthropomorphic characters. But you might want to think a little bit bigger. Like, for example, I cannot say the word exactly. Like, you may want to go the more saucy area, or you don't want to go to the not saucy area. So you have to decide on early on as well what is what you want to do. So you got to consider the pros and cons of it. Like if you're going pure, clean, safe for work, what restrictions they're going to put on you, on your team, or if you want to go to saucy area, what's the restriction on that in terms of advertising, in terms of promoting to people. Okay, so these are things that should be considered, right? So lastly, you should understand what you yourself can bring. Like how much can you do? Do you have the ability to write? Do you have the ability to program? And etc. It's good to know what you can do. But then we go to the next point. So then, if you know what you can do, you also know what you cannot do, and that's when you can pick your team members, right? So if you cannot do something, find someone who can, right? So at this point, I'm just going to talk about generally some key points that come up when people pick team members for a Furry visual novel project, right? But it can also be applied to any kind of project you want to do with anyone. So you have to consider things such as price, like if you want to look for an artist, most likely you need sprites, and most likely you need CG. So, and you're going to need a lot of it. So you may need to find someone whom you can discuss to come with a certain price that's good for you and for them, right? And the second thing is about the rights. So just because you have the money for the art, doesn't necessarily mean the artist is selling you the rights to the art. So you have to be very clear when you partner up with the artist, like, okay, I'm giving you this money, I also want the rights. But this also applies to not just art as in the visual art, but also your music, and to some degree, your sound effects also, they have rights. So you have to talk to these people that you hire. What exactly are you getting from them? Okay? And of course, the idea of deadlines. So the thing about Furry visual novel is maybe back when we first started out near the time of COVID, you would see like you could push a VN out every month. Now a VN update every month. Now everyone's gone back to their full-time jobs. It's going to be very hard to stick to a deadline. You yourself also may be having your own job, and this visual novel that you're making is more of a side gig. So you got to know how much time you can deliver consistently. So if you plan to make this project like a Patreon project that needs to be updated regularly, what customers are looking for most of the time is consistency. Like if you say you're going to update every 2 months or every 3 months, make sure you deliver on that. Right? So, and of course, you have to accept the fact that if you're going for a visual novel that's very lengthy, your story is very long, your team members are going to shuffle. You're not going to have the same sprite artist, you're not going to have the same CG artist. So before you even start hiring the first person, you may want to have like a list of people who you want to work with. So if person A is not available, you can look out for person B, and so on and so forth. Right? And lastly, consider not only the person's technical skills, but their abilities to work within a team. So this sounds like you're hiring someone for an actual job. To some degree, yes, it's true. Because if you are, let's say you are the super VN developer that can do everything, great. But if you need someone to work with you, you gotta know some basic things like, for example, how good are they accepting feedback? Not to insult anyone, but we know that being told that this is not up to what you're looking for and you need some changes is very difficult for people to hear. So you're gonna need to find members who are, can you take this criticism objectively and work with me like that? Okay? And to some degree, it's also important to know their life circumstances. So this is to the more psychological part. So like when you go for a job, people get sick. People may have an off mental health day like that. So you need to be aware of your team members. Where are they right now? If it's good to check in with them once in a while. If you know like this person is having some serious life issues, giving them a big job may not be a good idea. So you may want to consider other team members, or you may want to consider giving them a much lighter job like that. Okay. So next. So this is just a quote we asked from Orion, who made Remember the Flowers. This is what they're talking about, making getting the team members. I hope that anyone interested in making FBNs doesn't feel like they need a huge team to make it happen, but you might end up with a nicely sized team either way. It's not the size of the team that matters, but how you manage it and how you support each other as teammates to try. Okay? Next. Alright, so realistically, if you're going to start your VM project, you have to consider money. Exactly. Okay? So this is from Graphitron. So it takes the look at everyone's Patreon. I just picked the safe for work ones. So we're looking at the number of paid patrons. Alright? So as you can see, even the biggest visual novels, like Remember the Flowers and the rest, when they started at launch, the numbers are way below 100. And you know like how much a Patreon charges? It could be $1, it could be $3 like that. So at start, it's only this much. And it took how long? Up to 25 minutes, roughly like about 4 years for Remember the Flowers to reach that number. For the rest, maybe a gap of 1 year, a gap of 4 years or 5 years, it only goes that high only. So you have to be realistic when you're starting the visual novel. You cannot anticipate like, oh, the Patreon is going to pay for everything. Okay? Because when you start, it's going to take several months, and if not realistically, several years for you to start to build your own community. So if you are the lead, you probably, before you want to start anything, you might want to set aside like a model, like a set amount of money that I'm going to invest into the visual novel this much. Then be prepared. You might need to add on to it and all that. Okay? So next. So those points are summarized here. Don't go into an FBN creation project expecting to turn a profit, although we want to, but it's advised not to be your highest priority. Prioritize elements needed to push and update first. So let's say you've already started your project. Prioritize getting the story out. So if you're the writer or if you're the director, a lot of time for FBNs, people want to know your characters, they want to know your story. So make sure you can still push that out. So all the glitz and glamour, like for example, the very fancy CG, you might need to use a sketch instead for a while. SFX or music, you might want to get a stock one instead, so that you can still release your story first and then replace those things later on. Alright? So, and of course, backgrounds as well. Alright? So you can find stock images and apply a filter, and then you can use it. More important is about your ability to credit it, and then you're good to go. Right? So next. So this is the take-home message just for the team the team leader. Know what you want to make and meet other people who can help you make that idea come true. It will take time, it will take money, it will take energy if you want to make something really big. So that goes back to your goal. If you want to make something small, great. You want to make something big, great, but make sure you know what you get into. And of course, it's about making anything. And then later you make it beautiful. Right? So don't just get stuck at it has to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect first. It just needs to be out there, get your community, and then make it much nicer after that. Right? So focus on quality over length. Alright.
Okay. Again, I'm Wattson. I'm the main programmer for the Demon Lurks and many other very visual novels. I'm going to cover the programming, and I'm also going to cover the sound since we don't have a sound person here. I have several of our sound people for advice, but we'll get to that. But first, for the programming. As a programmer, your first consideration is going to be which engine you want to do, and that's going to be limited by what mechanics your team has decided you want to do. If you want just a plain visual novel, I would personally always recommend RenPy. It's very easy to learn, very easy to get something going and set up, and just very easy to work with. I've loved using it for many years. That said, it cannot do everything well. More advanced mechanics like having a rhythm game or a deck building game will be a lot more work on your part if you want to go that direction. If you do, I would recommend using Unity, which is a very mature engine. It has a lot of libraries and modules that you can pick up and use and are ready for you to just have fun with. Though it's still going to require you to know more about programming to get what you want. Godot is also an up-and-coming engine I personally recommend a lot. It's very easy to learn. I love its documentation, and it's just fantastic from what I've used it for. Though it has less already made like tutorials and things like that, so you're gonna have to learn a bit more on your own. But also, I do want to cover it. your team does not have a programmer, you do not need to be super advanced with it. If you're just a writer wanting to program a visual novel by yourself and want to pay for somebody who knows more, I would just recommend RenPy. It's super easy and would help you get off the ground really fast. And maybe after you matured a bit, you can maybe even get a programmer or somebody who knows more who can help you elevate the quality of your VN. And also, if you are in that same boat, just try to look around. There are the Microsoft forums for RenPy, there is the documentation, and you can also ask other VN devs. All of us are more than happy to answer questions or just help you, figure stuff out, because we were all there, we've all struggled through learning programming, and we all want to help each other have a higher bar. Next. So here's some tips for just, if you're a writer and you do not know programming, here's some fast things I would recommend learning fast. For RenPy, just hit Shift R, you can auto reload. It makes debugging things so much faster. Just type in a change, save it, and then it'll automatically update itself while it's running. Fantastic. I love it a lot. Any other engine dream wish they could have that. If you're planning to have a large or medium project, break up the script into multiple files. I have seen people who've written like 15,000 line script.rpy files. They horrify me. Please don't do that. If I find it, I will judge you. I also recommend looking into RenPy's animation and transformation language, or ATL as they call it, and transitions. You can get a lot of polish by just moving the sprites around occasionally. It is a visual novel, so don't just rely on words to convey the story. Do try to have like the sprites or things change occasionally to keep readers' interest in, so that they're not just staring at the bottom third of your screen for hours on end. Try to make it so that there's something going on up there, because it is art and you should be getting people to look at it. I also know that some people like to have like little animations. If you are having a short animation thing, you can do that with ATL. Anything larger, please use a WebP movie file. I know projects that have written like an animation that is 200 images back to back, and RenPy trying to load that will cause it to overload its image cache and it will lag or crash. Please don't do this, I'm terrified. Other simple things, I've seen so many projects that have a solid black image in the files. There is a way to do that in code. You do not need to have that. Please save your file space a little bit. There's just an image black equals solid, and you can pick a color, any color even. Layered images are the best way to do sprites. Some people also call them like paper dolls, where it's just a bunch of layers and you stack them on top of each other. This makes it really easy to swap out like faces or outfits, or you can even do poses if you are mechanically inclined enough. You'll need to talk to your artist about how you want to do that, but it can save a lot of time and just get a lot more bang for your buck by just being able to swap out images. And if there's more than one person who's testing your game or is accessing the files, I do recommend learning a bit about GitHub. So that way you can have like a project repository, so you can just upload the files or changes up and down between you and them. It makes it so much easier than just having to zip up the entire game, send it over, and then zip it up and back and forth. It has a gigantic mess, and I will never work with you if you do that. Please don't. Now, if you're also just learning RenPy, here are the docs that I recommend going through. The quick start's a good one. The GUI customization, I've never read it and I don't care. Most of the language basics, unless you want to do audio filters, those are complicated and you don't really need to look at it. Movie is only if you need movie, and if you have money for voice acting, you're already well beyond those projects. I also recommend you do the text displaysable transition segment, except for the 3D stage, because that's complicated and you probably need a programmer for that anyway. And I've never used live 2D cubism. It's weird and scares me, and I'm terrified of looking at it any more than I have. Here we have a quote from Mako from our workshop. He says that whatever your intention, think carefully and critically about this, and keep in mind that lacking minigames does not make your visual novel lesser in any way. I fully endorse this. It's fine to just have a visual novel where it's just visuals and text. You do not need to be complicated with this. People will read through it and enjoy it all the same. I'll only ever put in mini as like a little bonus as my recommendation, because that just adds so much more on the project. That said, if you are wanting to learn more about basic programming, you don't want to just be basic RenPy. I recommend picking up Python, which is the language of RenPy. It is very easy to use. I picked it up very quickly over a short number of years, and it's honestly, even using RenPy taught me how enough Python to get a job. So it's very cool to learn with that. Web3 Schools is a great site for it. And I also always recommend reading the documentation of any engine you're using. It is very important to know your engine and how it works. And there's also various YouTube tutorials for RenPy. There's Vimy and Zale Learnings. I personally already knew enough programming going into Python that I didn't need them, but if you are a beginner, they are a good source of knowledge. Next slide. If you want special effects and you're less skilled, there are various options. The Lemmasoft forums has various things in the RenPy cookbook section of the forums that are just freely available modules that you can just slap into your project and get something neat out of it. There's also a lot on itch.io that I've gone through. I think there's a lot from the, what is that? The Fennec Step, that's it. Fennec Step, they have so many things available for them. I also have some as well. If you want to look up Wattson.itch.io, I have some available. If you want to do shaders, you're already a programmer, but if you want to learn shaders like I have, the Book of Shaders is a great place to start, as well as Shader Code, which has a bunch of publicly available like shader code they can look through. If you are going to use that code though, you are going to need to translate it to RenPy's OpenGL stuff, but that's way too much to get into for this panel. And many games are possible in RenPy, but I do suggest trying to keep it simple because there is nothing in the engine that will help you. Learning screen language is terrifying and hard, and I've struggled through it, and I will happily help anybody with it, but it's also just, if you want more mini games, I would suggest maybe looking to another engine as well. Next is, I'm going to try to cover the music. I do want to stipulate I am not an audio developer. I do not know audio stuff, but I did ask a lot of my audio dev friends for advice for this segment, and I'm just going to paraphrase what I could summarize here. I would like to credit Synvalin, Eamon, Samples, Martini, Camazul, and Hyena Blood. I also want to credit TwizTune. He got his response back to me late after I made these slides, but he's the sound effects dev for Where the Demon Learns, and I want to credit him as well. I'm so sorry I couldn't include you in the slides, it's pretty late, but yeah. And there's all other socials if you want to find them. Next slide. They recommended for cheaper budgets, copyright free can be good. It's there. I mean, of course, it is free, and often you might only need like source, like where you got it from. They just say that if many other projects are also probably using the exact same copyright free music and audio, so it might sound the same to some other VMs. I've definitely heard some tracks that were in Where the Demon Lives that were like, oh yeah, I've heard this in other YouTube videos and stuff, and it's a little bit, it can take people out of it sometimes. I think we have replaced most of that stuff though in Where the Demon Learns. There's also now apparently a flood of AI music out there, so you have to keep a lookout for that. It's very sketchy with all that. Their suggestions were to look at looperman.com and freesound.org. They also recommend licensing tracks from composers. I don't know too many projects that have done this, but if you just want a single track from a composer, you can just reach out to them and see if you can license it directly. This can be cheaper than just hiring a full-on composer if you do not have the budget for that, while still allowing you to have a bit more of a unique sound to your game. I think if you're looking to do that, you're looking for a synchronization license is what the name of it is. And of course, always provide proper credit regardless of your source. Even if it says you don't need to credit it, I would always credit everybody who works on the project. It's just good practice and makes everybody happy. Next. For working with composers, we are going to assume now that you have a budget for composers or sound effects people. So this is advice for that. If you're going to go through this, pick a composer that's based on the genres you want. have some idea to what sounds you want your game to have or vibes you're going to be going with, and try to play to their strengths. If you don't know music terms, you can still talk to them. You can describe scenes that might be used, and you could have musical examples of what you want from other VMs, or just tracks that you're aware of. Keep a list of those inspirations for them. And communication is very key. Just keep an open dialogue with each other, and compromise is important, and try to inspire each other to get a better product. If you're working with multiple musicians, I think like Remember the Flowers has a lot of musicians. They recommend that if working with them, have an audio lead who helps with this cohesion, so that way all of them are working on the same page, and it's not like a lot of disparate little sounds that don't quite mesh together. Well, they usually will mesh pretty well together, but you can get it much stronger, like leitmotifs that carry across from different tracks and little remixes that are, informing about the characters and stuff. They can really help to add that cohesion that you want, make scenes more powerful. And be sure to have some variety so it's less predictable and formulaic. Just make sure you have a good variety of sounds, like for comedy scenes and sad scenes and all the little things in between. Next slide. Now we're going to assume that you are a musician and you want to get into the end dev, or you just want to know what it's like to work on a VM. Try to plan out leitmotifs and other motifs from the start. If there are multiple musicians, try to share ideas with them. Remixes and arrangements are very economical and it reinforce ideas very well. Each bounce for making songs memorable but not distracting, because you can have a big swelling orchestra that will make it so that nobody can read anything, because it's just very big bombastic music. You need to try to make it subdued so it's not, so people, because again, this is for a visual novel, people are reading it for the most part, unless it's a scene that's like a movie or something, a movie segment, but that's its own separate thing. That adds some more scripted and you will, You also need to think about the fact that you need the sound to be looping, because readers can take a variety of paces. Some people are slower, some are faster. So some people might just hang on a scene while they're laughing with their friends about it or something. So the song needs to go on for a very long time. So make sure it has loop breathing for people who are just paused and not really going very quickly. And if you want to get into VNs, put out feelers in various spots. So there are a lot of VN discords. Try to just join them and ask around if anybody's looking to make a VN, because often everybody knows each other. We're all in these different places, and usually we'll notice stuff like that, somebody looking around. And make sure to have a portfolio of at least like 3 songs and genres you're strong in. That can help a lot with people knowing what you're good at and what you are looking to do more of. Next slide. I also want to cover soundtracks and paying musicians. The terms for soundtrack distribution should be made up front. I know various VMs that do have like soundtracks are uploaded and available for anybody to download. So make sure if you're working with a musician, talk to them about how you both want to distribute it, whether it's owned mostly by the artist and they are going to be getting most of the credit, or if you're having it be more part of the project that's sharing in that revenue. Some musicians may even offer a discount if they are allowed to just own it, so that way they get some of that revenue directly back to them, and they'll charge you a bit less for making the song. But you'll need to ask each artist. It can vary wildly. You might not get much if this is your first album as well, so be aware of that. And for musicians, do not undersell yourself. You are worth a lot to us in the end of. You really should get a proper financial compensation and like a wage that can help you live. Though, do you know that most VM projects do not have a ton of money, so you'll need to weigh that together, and it's going to be a project by project basis. Though, do hope that they do get more money. Some musicians do charge by the minute music. Some charge by how many hours they work on a piece. Some are more based on complexity. Like a sound that's more of an ambient loop is going to be pretty easy to make a 30-minute thing of. Or if you're making a big orchestra piece with a bunch of tracks and layers, that's only 2 minutes. That's very complicated and could take a very long time to make. You're going to need to ask each musician how much they want to be paid and how they work it out. And you should probably expect to be paid as much as an artist would be for a CG, generally speaking. Again, it depends on the musician, but that's what I was told is about standard. I also want to cover a little bit for sound effects. Sound effects are usually easier to direct given that they're very short sounds. There's like a hit thump or footsteps and all that. It sounds like a thing or doesn't. It's also easy to direct as well. You can also generally use a mic input if you want, just to be decent, and maybe get an audio person to exfoliate around to make sure it doesn't have any stray sounds that are weird. Most VMs do use OGG for in-game music files. It's a good balance of quality and file size. MP3 can also be good for sharing around what's like just like test hearings and with beta readers. And Wave is good for soundtrack releases. The easiest way to add loops to your song is to just cut the tail off at the end of the song and attach it to the start of the song. Programmers just need to add a light fade, and it's easy enough to do. Give devs loop timestamps since they usually won't know on their own. This is just see if I said if given, but yeah. Next slide. Okay, we're on to sprites now. Thank you very much.
We can't hear you. Put it inside your mouth.
Okay, like this.
Oh.
Yes. Right now, I'm okay. Oh, wait. Okay, so hello, I'm Mako. I am a part-time furry artist. I'm not sure if all of you know me, but I make spicy stuff.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm also
Sample work, please.
So I'm actually an engineer. I studied in WTDL for, I say a total of 4 years, but I've only actually lived here for maybe 2.5 because of MCO, which kind of sucks. So now I'm a corporate slave in the Philippines. But yes, I work on the sprites for the other WTDL VN. And yes, I love cats. Who is a cat person here? Okay, that is a surprisingly low amount of cats. Anyway, I also love film. Next. Okay, so who among you are artists here? Raise your hand. Oh, okay, that's a lot. So I'm sure you guys know how hard making a single artwork is. Just one. Sometimes it can be like a week, 2 weeks, more. Sprite development is somewhat different because instead of making one actual art piece, you're essentially making maybe 10, 12, or maybe like 1.5, 2.5, given the many elements that you can see right here. So if you're used to CSP, this sucks. Like seeing all of these layers and then not knowing where things are, I'm sure you can relate. And sometimes, if your iPad maybe is not like, or your software or your computer hardware is not as powerful, things start to slow down. So yeah, I'm here to give you tips on how to make things easier, to make your workflow manageable. Next thing. Okay, so what I'll be discussing first is silhouetting. So that's the overall, I'm sure you recognize that thing over there. Yeah. So that's how important silhouetting is. And using unique design characteristics. So of course, if you make a visual novel, you have to make your character stand out. You have to really set yourself apart. You also have expressive expression. So expressive expression, I'm sure you know what that means. And seamless stitching points. So unlike normal artworks, you need to have these certain points to where you could like seamlessly change things like expression, tone, things like that. And lastly, organization. Okay, let me catch my breath. I'm like not used to shooting and everything. So, can I ask for a volunteer?
Oh, I got me.
Okay.
Oh my god. Well, there you go.
Here. What is your name, sir?
Awesome.
Wow, is that D Forset? D Charizard Forset?
Okay, sure.
So imagine, we're on stage. So this is subject 1, and then this is subject 2.
Oh.
Which among these poses would you prefer?
I'm going here.
Oh.
I think we need to see more. I think we need to
Do you see?
Are you serious?
Oh,
Oh, hell yeah.
So you can see how different having someone standing still versus someone doing something or having their arm do something. So that's the similar context before stand up. So you can see the difference, like having some different arm placements make in like a pose. So if you are drawing a single model character, you would draw something with more curves, more form, instead of having someone just straight up standing still. So of course, when you're reading, maybe okay, you're focused on the text, but sometimes your eyes do glance up at the sprites. So you would want, if you're having a spicy VN, you would want something more eye-catching.
Ooh.
So definitely this type. Okay, wait. Okay, I'll take a face reveal. So as you can see here, it's not just straight up a line. So you have many different shapes and sizes. You have many different features. For example, the hair curves like upwards, and then you have it go in. And then you have the arms that create this flowing sense of motion. Here you can see that there are actually like holes in the form, so it breaks up the monotony. Whoa, holes! So you could break up that single solid form and make it more natural looking. And then you have this, for example, I'm sure if you play WTDL, you know who that is right now. So you have here a straight line, but on the other side, you have a curve. No, actually off. Okay. There you go. So you have the entire right side curved downwards. So it kind of breaks up the monotony on the overall shape. Okay, so here's like a sneak peek of what I actually did when designing the outfits of Lucian, the best boy. Who is a fan of Lucian here?
Huh?
Oh.
Who's the what? Whoa, what's the question?
Who is a fan of Lucian?
What's final question?
Lucy, the character Lucy.
Oh my gosh! Wow, big fan.
Oh, no,
Big fan.
I didn't see it.
Okay. Anyway, so as you can see, there are many iterations that you would have to go through in designing a character. So usually one is not enough. So if you create, for example, okay, you create a character with a plain t-shirt, you give it to your boss, it kind of doesn't give them any options to choose and maybe to refine what they want that character to actually be, what kind of vibes they have. So for example here, you have like, a typical crop top jacket that you see in many of the artworks in the family. So that gives off more of like, frat boy energy. As opposed to this, for example, he has a polo, part of the belt is like just loose. So this would indicate somewhat more of like a chill, casual instead of like very brash and very loud. So I would say, here are mostly things. Credit to one of the best artists, Isco, IXKO. For making what I call El Pepe, so he's like a little boy. So as you can see, there are really many iterations for you to go through. So for example, when I designed the AU version of King, I had to go through many colors before we finally settled on like a more darker blue shade. But overall, you really have to iterate. So maybe one design will not work out, you have to do another one, and then you would over time have to like maybe, for example, here we started off with pink and white. Here was white and pink and then yellow, and then there was all yellow. So you really have to go through the motions and to really iterate. Okay. And another thing I would suggest, especially when making characters, is you use color theory. So if you're familiar with color theory, you would use analogous colors or complementary colors so that it doesn't really look too messy. Like for example, here, it was a bit, here it's a bit contrasty, so you have like the white bluish with the yellow. Here is more analogous, you have like the yellow and the red and then the brown. And then here is like a more pink to red, so it's like a gradual shade. So that's something I would suggest you get into color theory so you also know what is more appealing, especially when it comes to a wide range of audiences. Okay, there. Expressions. So, as everyone said earlier, you're not just reading text on a screen, you're actually also viewing whatever the characters are doing, hence a visual novel. So, expressions are very important in conveying whatever they're actually saying. So, as you can see, I'm pretty sure you could guess what this does, right? Just looking at it, you would imagine what kind of dialogue that is. And maybe here, he's happy, something good happened, and then here, maybe in the bedroom, he saw something that was too big or something, and now he was really shocked or something. So yeah, so expressions really help convey everything. So, like I mentioned, you're not just drawing actually one face, you're drawing multiple faces. So if, for example, your boss says, okay, I want 12 expressions, you will have to do each and every expression as like a template so that the devs will be able to switch between them seamlessly. So one trick to keep the entire process easier, what I like to do, is I would have a head, like a general head shape, and I would just change minor things like the nose placement, the eye placement. I'm using the example here, the credits to the guy in the back. But yeah, so generally when we do sprite heads expressions, we keep the overall shape as you can see in the GIF. And then the eyes would be the one to change, the eyebrows, the ears. So especially given that we're dealing with animals, animals can't really show emotion. So what we would really focus on are the eyes. Those are the biggest things to express emotion. We would have the eyebrows, obviously. And something that people don't usually think of are the ears, but the ears do play a big part in the conveying of emotion. And then, you have the snout, and then you also have the nose. Yes. So feel free to experiment on what you want to change. So for example, there you can notice the hair actually goes up as well. So that's something you could play around with. Maybe you could like tilt the head, or maybe you could also tilt the nose. So it's up to you on how you want to convey the emotions. Okay, this one, little side story. I actually removed his pants, but I was told to put it back on. So you guys don't get to see it.
We wanna see it.
We wanna see it.
Where is it?
Subscribe to our Patreon.
Alright, we're convincing.
Okay. So like I mentioned a while ago, there are these things called like stitching points. So for example, you see here in the neck, I basically cut the line art and the colors into two. So one is the head and then one is the body. So at least when the programmers are changing it, they know that okay, this head will switch and then it'll just be on top of the other layers. So it'll be easier for the devs and everyone to switch different emotions. And so you also have clothes. So for example, especially given that it's, the AU is a bit ranchy, so clothes will be coming off and then changing maybe to like more casual or intimate clothes. So that's something that you also have to keep in separate layers so that the devs will be able to change it depending on the situation. So good areas to split are usually the neck, like around the neckline, where usually the line art is split from maybe like the fur fluff or like the neck area. And then usually for other than that, yeah, the clothes are another like stitching area where you like remove, like depending on the body shape and everything. Okay, so if you're familiar with stop motion, this is exactly the same principle where you have your actual fixed body, and then you would just change the emotions based on the other parts. So exactly the same techniques, I would say. Okay, so the last is the organization. So as artists, of course, we're working with things in the long term, maybe for example months, 2 months. So you want to know where things are. So you don't want just like layer 1 and then the next thing you know you're at layer 1000. So actually that's happened to me where I've just added so many layers that I don't know where to find things. But yes, it's really good to keep things in folders, especially the different emotions and the different parts. So for example, in a VN you would have characters with face maybe the left, maybe the right. So you would have 2 separate bigger umbrellas, so the left and the right sprites. And then from there, what I did was I separated the clothes, the emotions, and the actual body from each other so that you can just hide it and then work on whatever you're working on at that moment. And for example, King has 2 versions, I would say. So one is the buff version and one is the chum version. So I also split those into different categories. So that makes it much easier for you to work around all these elements. And a technique that I would do, so if you would, if you know, right, usually the ends are like cell shaded. So what I do, I would literally just copy paste all the layers and just edit it depending on what needs to be edited. So if I have like the base, for example, the neutral base, it has like the overall shadows in the nose area and whatnot. I would just copy paste it onto the next and kind of just erase it to fit whatever expression is present. Okay, next. Okay, thank you.
No, it's okay, no man. Alright, can you guys hear me properly now?
Yes.
So thank you, Mako, for explaining the technicalities on. So hi, I'm Eli. Next. So I'm gonna bring you guys about the process of making backgrounds in a visual novel. So quick introduction of myself. I'm an illustration student. I studied nearby here. I know some of you guys are I work for WTDL nursing home, of course, and another game that is about to release actually is called Land of Drawn. It's made by my friend. It goes by two. But yeah, I also do commissions on the side. I'm a freelance artist. I go by Alexon on Twitter or X. Some of my hobbies, I like to live draw. I like to do some watercolor on the side. And yeah, without further ado, let's get into. I'm sure you guys, especially you guys artists, have gone through this part.
That's very relatable.
Yeah. Well, right. So 3 points I want to explain to you guys on this talk is that I'm gonna be talking about a little bit of the main principles and backgrounds, and then the main part is the core steps of making backgrounds, and then in the middle I will sprinkle some quick tips and advices on how you guys can level up your art and everything like that. So next. Alright. I'm sure you guys have heard of these terrifying terms: perspective, composition, values, mood, texture, and colors, and color theory, and all of that. I'm not gonna dive in too deep into this, but like a good background won't really be much if you guys don't understand these first. But it's alright if you guys haven't learned properly learning because we're all in a learning stage, and it's alright, So yeah, alright, next. So the main core steps of making background, I've compiled these 6 steps, which consist of concept art, construction, lining, blocking, coloring, and then finally finishing. Alright, next. So first one, concept art. When you think of concept art, you will probably think of like character turnarounds and all of that, and then thumbnails. So yeah, that's basically what concept art is. There's like 3 main things: thumbnailing, production sketching, which is quite more niche, and then you also do mood board in this stage, on this stage you will figure out like the compositions and you explore color thumbnails to figure out which color suits best for the overall scenario, for the overall mood, and the posing for the characters obviously. Next. Alright, so first one, thumbnail. Okay, I want to share you guys a bit about one of my past projects where I had to like design a whole room based on a theme. And it has to be like very, very accurate and everything. So what did I do? How do I find out the best angle? How do I find out the best composition, the colors and everything like that? Is through thumbnailing. Well, when it comes to thumbnails, you will start with very, very rough sketches at first, and then you will like make a bunch of them because these are, as you can see in this picture, they're quite small, right? The whole canvas is like only this size. That's why like you guys can do these very efficiently and explore a bunch of stuff. And yeah, they can really, really help you like brainstorm properly on how you guys can create the best angle, composition, all that. Right. After you do the thumbnailing, after you figure out, oh, I like this angle. I like when the camera faces this part of the room where it shows this. How do I figure out what I should put in this room, on this area? That is where we get to production sketching. These are some of my past works where I have to study something like a beetle, a car, and some room design. And this is actually the project I was talking about. I have to design an astrology school for college work, and I have to like design all of these furniture, the heights. I have to know which height is like. Is this the same height as the human? Is the furniture fits the whole overall theme? And that is why like if you wanna like study more of like what these furniture and objects props will come about, you have to do product sketching, because I have to step into this astrologer's shoes to imagine like what will an astrologer do. Like when you think of astrology, you think of stars. And how do you look at stars? Telescopes. So I had to design a whole ass telescope just for this project. And yeah, and what are their hobbies? Do they like making coffee? Do they like, I don't know, biking or something? I will put like some bicycles inside the room and maybe a coffee machine, all of that. So yeah, that's all about product sketching. Next. Alright, after you figure out what you want to put in this room, how do you want to angle, how do you want to compose this whole room? How do you want to compose this scene or background? Alright, we of course start with the construction or sketching, and we call it differently. But when I go to construction, I always ask myself these three main questions, right? Where is the horizon line? How many vanishing points are there? And what are the character locations and their posing? So yeah, these three main things, I have to answer them first before I move on. So next. Alright. I'd like to, put things neatly first. So there are three main parts of this background. First is background, foreground. These are quite self-explanatory. Background is at the back, background is in the middle, foreground is at the front. So it may sound very, very small, but this little step really helps you guys to like, compose yourself and like not get lost into the sea of layers, like what Mako said. He has gone through like 100 layers or something, right? And then yeah, you guys wanna really avoid that, because you want layers to really help you and aid you in the process instead of like slowing you down. So you have to like separate these into more proper arrangement. Next. All right. I will dive into a little bit of basics of perspective. So I want to introduce you guys. I'm sure some of you guys know already what these are, but I like to introduce HL and VPs. HL is horizon line, and VPs is the vanishing point. So what is a horizon line? I want you guys to imagine yourself on a beach, right? And you just look at the shore, you look at the sea, and you see this dividing line in the middle that separates the sky and the sea, the ocean. And I want you guys to like imagine like, oh, there's a white box on the sand that is like shorter than you. Of course, you will normally see the top plane of the box because it is located below the horizon line. And if it's above the horizon line, you will normally see the water plane. Logic, right? Like, yeah, that is basically what the horizon line is. It's the dividing line that really conveys all the 3Dness in a background. And it is also supported by a term called vanishing point. A vanishing point is basically a converging point where all parallel lines will all slowly converge into one single point. And you can obviously see all of these parallel lines again. There's a parallel line going in on the table, on the sofa, and everything, on the carpet, everything like that. There are usually a bunch of vanishing points. It depends because I'm sure you guys heard of like 1 point perspective, 2 point perspective, 3 point perspective. You can even go to 6 point perspective. But these determine the composition and the perspective of a scene. So I just want to introduce it quickly because this will help a lot on the next slide, which is using the horizon line for double checking the figure type. So I made this little formula, this very simple formula, which is horizon line equals the viewer's eye line, and the viewer's eye line equals the character's height. So, and back to that little analogy where you're on the beach, you would see the horizon line is basically spot on in the middle, which is basically located on where your eye is, right? So instead of imagining a box, you can imagine a person in front of you. Maybe they're in the same height. They will normally have their head positioned exactly on the horizon line, right? That is because they're the same height as you, because their eye line is on the same line as you. So viewer's eye line equals the character's height. That is a very simple way to simplify it. And yeah, sometimes if you want them to be shorter than you, like all European characters cannot be the same height, right? There has to be some varieties and everything like that. So yeah, the horizon line will be the same distance as the height of the MC. That is a very quick way to help. It may be simple, like a very simple concept, but you will be surprised at how many beginner artists actually get caught up on this, struggle on actually finding the actual height on people's height on the scene. So yeah, next. All right, after I do all of that, I go to the blocking phase. And in this phase, I like to separate, like what I said, the background with one foreground again, and with values or colors. Some of you guys I'm sure have seen like professional artists when they're doing their painting, digital painting specifically, they will start with grayscale. Am I right? And the reason why is that because when you start with grayscale, you don't really have to worry about like colors, hues, saturation, and all of that. You just have to worry about like how dark things are and how light things are. You just have to worry about the main fundamental thing, which is values, right? And yeah, it is a very efficient and safest way to actually tackle a lot of things. Not only backgrounds, it can be paintings, it can be sceneries and all of that. And yeah, but there are some people that prefer starting with colors. I myself included sometimes, but they usually know what they're doing already. They already know how bright these colors are, how saturated, how the colors are like more warm and more cold, following the color composition that they already had in mind. So yeah, the pros and cons basically like if you start with grayscale, it will be more safer, it will be more easier to understand. While if you start with colors and hues, you have to worry about more stuff. So next. All right. So the final part to explain is the rendering and finishing. I feel bad for switching this part to like very shortly because I only prepared 2 slides because this is basically the longest part of the process of making not only that but a lot of things. I like to break it down into these 4 parts, which is you add on the shadows, ambient light, highlights, and finally textures. Okay, all right, shadows, right? When you think of shadows, you think of like the lack of light, the the absence of light. But it's actually not that. It's not that case. So I'm going to explain that later on the ambient light. But shadows, I like to divide them into form, and inclusion shadows. What is core shadow? Core shadow is the part of where the largest part of the shadow. When you just imagine a box being shined with light and they will cast a shadow, right? And they say, well, the majority of that shadow will only be dark. And you can see there are variations of the intensity of the shadow in some parts. Some of them are darker and some of them are fading off more. That depends on how far and how strong the intensity of the light source are coming from. So yeah, the core shadow is basically the biggest shadow that's usually located in the middle. And then the form shadow is the shadow that is usually cast by a form of an object. I want you guys to imagine a face. If you shine a light onto a face, you will see wrinkles on it, on the drawing, right? And then that is the reason why there are like darker areas on that one, because the skin is not like perfectly smooth. That would be very weird. But yeah, that is why you call it form shadow. It's caused by the actual the original form of that object that is casting it. And then I want to explain to you guys the last part, which is the occlusion shadow. The occlusion shadow is the darkest part of the shadow because it is located on the contact point of two objects. If you put like two balls, you have two balls, and two balls specifically, and you put them together. You put them together, and then with the contact point of those two balls will create darkest part. I know you're not Mako. But yeah, we also call it the contact shadow, because barely any light will be able to reach that part because it's so covered and so tight and everything like that. So okay, next one is ambient light. I want to explain something called diffuse reflection. Okay, back to the whole sentence that I said, like if you think of a shadow, it is the absence of light. But if that's the case, then if you see a shadow, it will be completely pitch black, right? And that is not the case at all in the real world. So that is when diffuse reflection will come in, and that is the process of how light scatters around it. So for example, if you put like an apple on the green box, a red apple on a green box, and then you shine a light into it, and then the shadow will normally be a mix of red and green, because the light will absorb a little bit of the green box, and then they bounce it off, and then they get absorbed on the apple. So yeah, that's basically what we call diffuse reflection, and we also call it ambient light or bounce light. So that's three names so far. Just call it bounce light also. But like yeah. And then the next one is highlights. Highlights is, I'm sure you guys know what highlights are. It's like the little bling with the thing at the end, like usually almost pure white. And these they're not always pure white, because the intensity of these white, the shine is based on material that is hit on the light. So for example, if you shine an apple again, apples textures are usually quite matte and soft. They don't act like metal. So the bounce will be a bit slightly less. While if you compare it to like if you shine a light onto a metal pipe or something, you will see a much more stronger reflection on that metal pipe. So you guys have to keep in mind that materials reflect differently, and on each material, like yeah, they behave more differently. And then the last one, texture. Next. Textures. Back then, I don't really care much about textures, right? Because I was like, oh, textures, people barely use them. It's like they're like so barely noticeable. But lately, the more I learn, especially when I got to college, I was like, okay, I'll try more. I'll try to experiment more with like brushes I can get online. Like, okay, they actually do quite a lot, because these small changes actually add a lot of depth into your background or your paintings or your art in general. So you can like add like different types of textures, like a wooden texture, a more shine, like the metal part, and then like a rug and all that, and then yeah, like these little details can really add a lot to your depth. And I want you guys to be more experimenting on like trying out lots of a combination of hard brushes, soft brushes, and being able to experiment with like a rougher texture and a softer texture to be able to combine all that. But yeah, that's all about textures. Thanks. All right, to wrap things up, I just want to say that understanding your fundamentals is the key to what it takes to be a background. So I mean, back again, like you won't be able to do much if you haven't understood the main parts of the main principle, like perspective, values, colors, and all of that. But that's still okay, like, because you're out and then yeah, but having the idea and the creativity is just as important as learning the fundamentals. So if you don't know what to draw, then what's the point? you don't know what you want to make. So what's the point? You're gonna like really train your creativity skills in the first way. So yeah, that will be all from me.
Alright, give me a moment, because I'll be sitting down. Hello. Testing. Okay, great. Hello. Alright, I'm Nawah. I'm the editor, one of the editors for the VN. So I'll start my part off. Almost there, guys. Okay. So, editing. This one is basically, I'm basically the counterbalance for the writer. When it comes to editing, basically I help balance Libra out and make sure that your writer stays on track. So, the first point. Alright, I'm not sure if you guys recognize this one, but if you get the reference, it's a wordplay. So the difference between an editor and a proofreader is basically the proofreader reads it and says like, okay, this makes sense. You spelled everything correctly, okay, we'll stop here and there. Editors go a little bit above that. So editors kind of have to like break down the scene and then they think, okay, this scene just happened. Do we really need this scene? Does this scene make any sense at all? So things that we want to look out for, things that are like consistency in terms of like the character dialogue, what they say. And then we're also looking into the pacing of the story. Is this story moving too fast or is this story moving too slow, right? And it really depends on how you want it to go. And then the editor will work with the writer and say like, okay, this one matches out. And then it also comes to enrichment. Basically, you want to make sure that the story is as good as it can be for your writer. Sometimes the writer may be a bit shaky in some areas, and the editor's job is to point that out and say, I think maybe the way you did this, how about we try this instead? And then there's a back and forth. Prose here is just basically, I'm going to say now, it's just basically the writer's art style. It's basically how they write in order to tell their story. Crutch words, this one's going to be a bit funny. These are like words that a writer normally defaults to, and it's like if you pay attention to what you're reading, you suddenly notice that this guy likes to use a lot of specific words, and it kind of like bogs the reader down. And then what we do is to add value to the story. So I, as an editor, can tell the writer, okay, maybe if we add this scene, or maybe if we put this scene later down the line, I think maybe the payoff to the story would be much better.
What if we add NSFW scenes to add enrichment?
Whoa. Okay, alright.
Adding more NSFW.
Alright, but then you gotta consider, right? Like, because since I'm working with the writer, the writer wants the story to be very safe for work friendly. So as an
too
editor,
bad.
I have to put a stop to them.
Damn.
NSFW, if a kid can read it without their parents getting a heart attack, then it's probably safe for work enough. That's a good starting point. Okay, so we'll go to the character dialogue. Okay, so character dialogue basically gives a lot of personality. Since this is a visual novel where you'll be reading things, your sprites, for the lack of movement, you won't be able to tell much of the character. So the bulk of it is going to be in the writing. So these are like some examples of dialogue taken from the novel, and then you can see that there's I'm not sure if some of you recognize the characters, but these are like some of the characters. This is Amare, one of the demons. He basically is the mechanic. He likes to talk about creating things and breaking them down. This one belongs to Lucian. He basically likes to work very hard because he wants to get that promotion in heaven. And this is best boy, one of the best boys. He's gifted in a way.
I think you're just biased.
A bit.
I love
I have
toes.
my bias.
I love toes.
Alright, so now we're going to go into the pacing of things, right? Alright, so I'm going to give an example of a scenario, right? Okay, I'm going to read along. Morris mutters another incantation. Fingers twitch and jolt as he was pressing invisible buttons. The talismans floating around him stop. Its papers turns into a different hue before a gale starts to pick up. With both hands outstretched, the exorcist casts a torrent of air, causing his foes to be blown back screaming. That's a lot of words to convey like one whole action, but I could just write this. Morris mutters an incantation, casts a gust of wind, his foes get blown away. Cause the action, and you get the consequences in less than like just two very short sentences, right? So if like let's say you're gonna write a fighting scene, if you do the first one, and there's gonna be a lot of it happening in the fight scene, you're gonna bulk your readers out. They're gonna get bored. So part of me, like when Libra writes these things, I have to be like, okay, maybe we can kind of shorten the sentences here, because for those who don't know, for our visual novel project, we aim to have around like 10K words per build. So we have to really be as efficient with our words as possible. So if we're having a fighting scene, I'll tell Libra, let's keep it short. You got your cause effect, and then you got your consequences. Keep it short and simple, right? And then on the other side, you also have examples where you get to slow the scene down. You get the characters to like enjoy each other. So instead of writing, you both continue your dinner while watching the show. Lots of character bonding you can probably imagine in your head. But no, you can actually slow it down, and then you can actually you can make a dialogue out of it. Here comes the legendary truck. Oh no! He does a twirling, he poses. My dreams to be with my beloved senpai forever dash. No, I mustn't give up for senpai. And then they both pose. This actually happens in the visual novel, and I think it's a really touching character moment between these two characters, and it really sells the relationship between these characters. If you have more scenes like this with characters at good points in the story, it really helps to sell their dynamic. But if you just keep writing the first one, okay, you went out for a date, oh, you went to get ice cream afterwards, you don't really know the characters' chemistry with each other. It's just actions, but you want to get into the meat of it. The meat, yeah. Alright, prose. Okay, so prose. This is the writer's art style. So prose itself, how do I explain it? There's a lot of prose. If you guys have read like books when you were younger, like especially for kids books, you notice that the words are very simple. That's fine. If you read things like J.R.R. Tolkien, like The Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, you notice that the words are quite heavy, right? But the way you write your visual novel, you can work with what you want. The editor will be there to help you and try and make sure that whoever's reading it, the readability goes very smoothly. So I'm going to give one example, which can be like done different ways. Okay, so and you can try and imagine in your head. Lucian tiptoes to the chair across the room, careful to avoid touching the clothes that litter the floor like landmines. Upon sitting, he looked down at his feet and sighed. His face crunched into a grin of "Ooh." And then this is another sentence, same thing, but the words are a little bit shorter now. He avoids stepping on dirty clothes as he went to this chair. He sat with the most disgusted look plastered over his face. So now this one is shorter, and I'm telling you what he's saying, what he's feeling right now. He's disgusted. Instead of the first one, you can kind of get the feeling that it's an unpleasant experience. And then we're just gonna go like even more shorter. This is like oh no, it died. Okay, all right. The other one, okay, we're really gonna simplify this. We can actually do that if you have an editor and then a writer working together, right? And then we got a passive sentence, meaning a dirty clothes in the room, Kohu's room made Lucian feel disgusted as he tiptoed. So this is now actually a passive sentence if you manage to pick that up. The first three were more of an active sentence because now you're walking through the actions with the characters as you're reading. This one is just, it's more of a thing that's happening in the background. This is basically, damn baby, live like this. If you actually read the visual novel, Kohu's room is a pigsty. Alright, crutch words, okay. Alright, this is my favorite part. So I'm going to give an example of one crutch word that Libra tends to fall into. I poke fun at him. Okay, so we're gonna read one out. Your heart aches as thoughts about how you haven't changed one bit from the weak little demon that stood by these riverbanks before. Notice the word heart. For a brief second, your heart feels heavy, a sadness that is not your own. Your heart aches at the vendor's discomfort. Rolling your eyes, your heart hardly accepted. Your heart leaps out from your chest. A bit of shame and for this heart. We put a lot of heart into our project, so much heart that I think our characters have heart problems. So now I'm like hyper focused. Like whenever Libra writes like heart, I'm like, if he's using heart to express like a feeling, how a character expresses their feeling, I'm going to be writing a little note like, Libra, can we not do this? I can excuse it maybe once or twice in an entire 10,000 word build. Anything outside of that, you hit your quota, I'm asking you to like, let's change it. Let's do something else, for a change. Right, so part of an editor's job is to like spot your writer's little mistakes, little habits, and tell like, hey, stop. Like, I've worked with Libra before, prior to Where the Demon Lurks, so I've gotten used to how his writing style is. Sometimes I would point out, because Libra has a very formal way sometimes when it comes to dialogue, and then I'm like, Libra, can we make it a little bit more casual for the readers, and then he has to change it like that. But these are all very small little things. But it's things like this, these little things that add up that can either enhance, make or break your experiences when reading the visual novel, right? Okay, let's see what else is happening. Oh, okay, so this is an example of how I fixed it. All right. Your heart aches at the vendor's discomfort. So when this scene was first written in the draft, I told Libra, okay, instead of having Kohu have a little heart attack episode, why not we just show how much in pain the vendor is, right? The man trails off, you're curious, but you decide not to press it. You can see his hand trembles as he closes the lid on his food truck. And then when you read the rest, it makes you feel a little bit of pity for this guy. So Kohu doesn't have to have a bit of a heart problem, you do. We make it happen for you, right? So yeah, that's like one of the examples of like crutch words used in this in our project that I have to like kind of pick up. All right, okay, suggest ways to enrich the story. So as an editor, because you're a step above the proofreader, you basically get to like bug your writer on ways to help improve the story. Like, okay, what can we do to help make it a bit better for the readers? So introspection, for example, if a scene happens, if a bomb explodes, and then like a bunch of people got hurt, how would your character react to it? How would your characters, the other characters react to it? It can give a lot of insight of how they process things, right? Action over dialogue or vice versa. So instead of like let's say the scenario whereby an egg drops, or like someone drops their phone on the ground, would it be advisable to have your character note that, or would they react in a way? Or for example, let's go with the explosion again, or like something over the top happens, and then your character says, "Wow, that happened," or would they go like? Would they like fall off? Would they actually like hands to their chest? It really, things like that, I'll have to tell you about. Is this how the character would react in the story? Can we maybe do that? And then there's exposition. All right, sometimes when it comes to like writing, you also have to be wary of things where there's going to be, it's a term called exposition dumping, where a character you meet and then suddenly 3 sentences later, they're pouring their heart out to a complete stranger that they don't know about. I have to tell Libra like, okay, maybe if he writes exposition, okay, Libra, I think that's enough. Maybe we'll save it for the next scene or somewhere down the line. Because if you trickle the information down slowly, you basically invite your reader to like think, oh, okay, so this little bit of information happens to them. I wonder what else, maybe this is how they act that way, instead of just telling them this is their whole entire backstory. Okay, you're done. I'm not gonna give any nuance. I'm not gonna make you think of other things. I'm just gonna tell you right then and now, right? So I have to make sure that information that is given to the reader comes at a pace that is more controlled. Okay, does the idea serve the story? So this is one of the things that we'll get into in the next slide, but basically when it comes to ideas to the story, it's like, if I were to remove this scenario or this thing that happens into the story, would it still be the same? If this little thing doesn't serve the story, like let's say for example, right before going fighting, you save the princess and now you need to fight the big monster and save the day. But before that, let's do a beach story. Let's all go take a vacation. That does not make any sense. We shouldn't be doing that. If that happens, I have to tell Libra, maybe we should have done this way earlier. Why do it now? Things like that, right? If you want to have ideas in your story, the editor will tell you, okay, if this idea bonds the characters together, if this idea serves the main story, the main themes of the story, maybe, yeah, we can probably fit that in, yeah, but if it's just for fluff, if it's just there, maybe not, but we have added little bits of things here sometimes, but it's very brief and short. If you do things that are very brief and short, it should be no problem. But if you take up pages just for a scene, it may not work out. It may bog your pacing down. So, oh yeah, okay. This is Kobu, and that's his dad over there, yeah. Whoa, damn. Alright, okay. Lucian, I'm a servant of God. Aren't you overdressed by your face? Think higher than that. Okay, so basically character banter between two characters. This is, to give context to the situation, this is when Kobu first met Lucian, the little dog, right? So when that happened, when this scene initially happened, I made a little point like, okay, this is an example of introspection. Like, okay, if Kobu finds out about this fact that an angel came to help him, how would he react? We can maybe put a little bit of an internal dialogue inside, and then after that we just added a little bit more. So this one is just a little bit, but it helps change the context of how your character reacts to the scene, right? But it also doesn't fall into the pit of dumping a lot of exposition. You don't know what the motivation is or why they're here. They're not sent by the main bad guy, but why are they still here? I'm still not giving you the answers, but I'm giving you a little bit more context of how this character reacts to it, right? Also, in our story, the big G up there, his name is Gary. Yeah, we just thought it was very funny to do. Alright, oh, this is a bonus. Alright, so these were some of the ideas that were left on the cutting room floor. Things that we wanted to implement, but it's like, no, we're not gonna do that. I don't think that worked out. So Kobu, since he is the king of hell, he can create his own demon general. But the idea was performance, okay. But he created a small little demon the size of like this, and then he accidentally dropped the heavy book. But we thought like, man, that's kind of sad. Like I don't think that would really serve anything in the story. There's like things like Tosa's corruption will manifest in him becoming increasingly horny. I told Libra like, Libra,
They're corrupted.
yeah.
Whoa.
I know. That's why I'm like, Libra, what are you doing here?
Now we know what you got into.
Yeah, that's why we're like, okay, let's put this into the AU where things can go really saucy. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with these, but they're like other characters, what they were going to be introduced as, or their role in the story. Zangix is the Kobu's deck, Fortis is the other demon general. They would often clash swords together months on end. That one was left on the cutting room floor because when I read it back, I was like, I think people will get different like implications of this. So no, we're gonna leave that there. But yeah, things like this, the back and forth between the editor and the writer, it's kind of normal. It's just to make sure that the main goal of the story is communicated without a lot of distractions that take away from the story. So that's something that I have to do as an editor for Libra. And I think that's about it. I think we're open to Q&As after. Oh, we don't have to. But do we have anything after this?